On the morning of the 15th of January, 1947, in an undeveloped section of Leimart Park, a mother taking her child for a walk spots something pale in the grass. At first glance, she believes it is a discarded mannequin. But it was not a mannequin, it was the body of a 22-year-old woman, bisected completely at the waist. The corpse had been drained of blood, scrubbed clean and posed. Her hands were placed over her head, elbows bent at right angles. Her face was slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears, a Glasgow smile. The Los Angeles Police Department was immediately compromised. Reporters from the Los Angeles Herald-Express arrived at the scene before many detectives, trampling tire tracks and destroying potential footprint evidence. But the biggest problem was identity. The body had no purse, no identification, and no clothing. The Los Angeles Police Department was stumped, but the press saw an opportunity. The Los Angeles Examiner offered the LAPD the use of their international news sound photo equipment, a primitive fax machine. Because the body had been drained of blood, the fingerprints taken at the morgue were blurred. The LAPD, in collaboration with the Examiner, sent these blurred prints via the sound photo machine to the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. The pictures arrived at approximately 11 o'clock. Quinn Tam called me on the phone and stated that he doubted they would be able to identify the prints. They were missing entirely, and 3 others were badly blurred. At the FBI's Identification Division, the pressure was immense. The Bureau held over 100 million fingerprint cards in their massive manual collection. Experts warned the transmission quality was poor. Yet, in what J. Edgar Hoover would later call a spectacular identification, the match was made. It took exactly 56 minutes. The unknown woman was Elizabeth Short. She was in the FBI files twice. First, from a job application in January 1943, when she applied to be a clerk at the Camp Cook Commissary. Second, from an arrest 7 months later in Santa Barbara for underage drinking. The FBI possessed her mugshot from the arrest and immediately released it to the press, fueling the media frenzy that was about to consume the case. Armed with the identification before the official police channels had fully processed it, Examiner reporters Wayne Sutton and Bevo Means placed a long-distance call to Boston. They reached Phoebe Short, Elizabeth's mother. Mrs. Short, congratulations. Your daughter Elizabeth has won a beauty contest in California. It was a lie. The reporters pumped the grieving mother for personal details about her daughter's life, her history, and her boyfriends, all while Phoebe believed her daughter was being celebrated. After extracting the information, they dropped the hammer. Mrs. Short, I am sorry. Elizabeth has been murdered. The Examiner even offered to pay for Phoebe's flight to Los Angeles, not out of kindness, but to keep her away from competing newspapers. By the time the coroner's van arrived to collect Elizabeth Short, the crime scene had been irrevocably compromised. Reporters from the Herald and the Examiner arrived before many of the investigating officers. In their rush for exclusive photos, newsmen and onlookers trampled over tire tracks and obliterated potential footprints in the weeds. The FBI files record a deep frustration with this chaotic environment. A special agent in charge noted that investigators could not even read their own mail without a reporter looking over their shoulder. The Bureau's internal memos reveal that while J. Edgar Hoover publicly praised the press for transmitting fingerprints, the reality on the ground was a media circus that hampered the investigation from the very first hour. To keep the public hooked, the newspapers sensationalized the violence. Printed stories claiming Elizabeth Short had been tortured for hours with cigarette burns and knives while alive. The police knew these torture stories were false. The autopsy showed she died of a cerebral hemorrhage and shock. But the LAPD allowed the torture rumors to circulate to keep specific details, like the true cause of death, secret from the killer. 6 days after the murder, the Black Dahlia Avenger made contact. A person claiming to be the killer called Examiner editor James Richardson, congratulating him on the paper's coverage. "You did a good job on the Dahlia story. Expect some souvenirs of Beth," Short in the mail. 3 days later, the souvenirs arrived. A suspicious manila envelope was discovered by postal authorities. Inside were Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book. The sender had taken forensic countermeasures. Just as the body had been scrubbed clean, the envelope and its contents had been wiped down with gasoline to remove fingerprints. This convinced police the sender was likely the killer. There are enclosed herewith 3 photographs of fingerprints removed from an anonymous letter. It is requested that these prints be checked through the single fingerprint section. Despite the gasoline, technicians managed to lift several partial latent fingerprints from the envelope. These were immediately sent to the FBI in Washington. This was a potential break in the case. The files reveal a crushing disappointment. The FBI conducted an exhaustive search of their massive single print files, but found no match. Wikipedia sources indicate a critical error occurred. The prints may have been compromised in transit, damaging the only physical link to the person who mailed the packet. The same day the packet arrived, on the 24th of January, 1947, a handbag and a single black suede shoe were found on top of a garbage can in an alley 2 miles from the body dump site. Mark Hansen, the wealthy nightclub owner, whose address book was mailed to the press, confirmed the purse and shoe belonged to Elizabeth Short. Like the packet and the body, these items had been wiped clean with gasoline, destroying any fingerprint evidence. But the FBI laboratory did find one microscopic clue that survived the killer's cleaning efforts. On the body of Elizabeth Short, investigators found 2 bristles. The 2 bristles are plant fibers bearing characteristics of palm tree fibers, which are used in manufacture of inexpensive brushes. This confirmed that the killer had scrubbed the body with a hard, bristled brush and water, likely in a bathtub or deep sink, to wash away blood and DNA evidence before dumping her. By the 1st of February, just 2 weeks after the murder, the investigation hit a stone wall. The reward of $10,000 offered by City Councilman Lloyd Gerald Davies had an unintended side effect. It triggered a wave of false confessions. The FBI files are clogged with background checks on men like Daniel S. Voorhees, a veteran who walked in demanding to confess. Agents quickly determined he was a mental case, with a prior record for assault, but not the Black Dahlia killer. The Avenger continued to taunt the police with cut and paste notes saying, "Had my fun at police," and later, "Dahlia killing was justified." But with the forensic evidence compromised by the press and the timeline muddied by false leads, the trail was already going cold. In the weeks following the discovery of Elizabeth Short's body, the Los Angeles Police Department was drowning. The brutality of the crime, combined with the $10,000 reward, triggered a psychological phenomenon. The city didn't just want to find the killer, half the city wanted to be the killer. The first name in the files was Robert Red Manley, a 25-year-old married salesman and musician with a distinct red-haired appearance. He was the last person confirmed to see Elizabeth Short alive. Robert Red Manley admitted to police today a month-long flirtation with Short, but steadfastly denied any connection with her death. Manley admitted to picking up Short in San Diego. He testified that he drove her to Los Angeles on the 9th of January, dropping her off at the Biltmore Hotel at 6:30 p.m. He claimed he left her there to meet her sister. "I left her in the lobby. That's the last I've seen of poor Beth." The LAPD grilled him for 48 hours. They needed leverage, so they turned to the FBI. Detectives suspected Manley might have a history of mental instability. They asked the Bureau to track down the Army officer who signed Manley's medical discharge papers. The FBI located the records, but they didn't point to a killer. They pointed to a man with confused nerves. Not a sadist. On the 20th of January, Manley was strapped to a polygraph. He passed once, then twice. The police released him. The files record his reaction upon release. He shook with sobs and told reporters,
"I called my wife. The first thing she asked me was, 'Did you do it?'"
With Manly cleared, the floodgates opened. The FBI files document a parade of mental cases and glory seekers.
Man walked into homicide department and said, "I can't stand it any longer. I want to confess to the sadistic killing."
Daniel Voorhees, a 33-year-old veteran, walked into the station and demanded to be punished. The FBI quickly ran his prints. Their reply to the LAPD was clinical. Voorhees had a prior arrest for assault to commit rape in Phoenix, but the Bureau urged caution. Police psychiatrists eventually deemed him befuddled and a mental case, not the mastermind behind the Black Dahlia surgery. Then came the tips from the public. One letter sent directly to J. Edgar Hoover pointed to a Spanish fellow named Freddy with a tattoo of the number 13 on his arm. The informant, an inmate, claimed Freddy was the killer. The Bureau dutifully forwarded the lead to the LAPD. But like hundreds of others, it evaporated. 2 years passed. The case was going cold. Then, in January 1949, the LAPD focused on a bellhop and former mortician's assistant named Leslie Dillon. Dillon had contacted the police psychiatrist, Dr. Paul DeRiver, offering theories on the murder.
"We hereby request your abstract, Form T2, indicating record of Leslie Duane Dillon, described as being male, Caucasian, red-brown hair. A copy of his fingerprints are enclosed."
He knew too much. He spoke of sadism and sexual dysfunction. He claimed a man named Jeff Connors was the killer. Police suspected Jeff Connors was simply an alter ego for Dillon himself. The LAPD frantically sent Dillon's prints to Washington, hoping for a match to the Avenger letters. The FBI report returned on the 14th of January.
"No identification affected."
Dillon was eventually released due to lack of physical evidence, though many modern investigators remain convinced he was the butcher. While Dillon was being interrogated, the district attorney was secretly investigating a doctor with a genius IQ and a dark reputation. Dr. George Hodel. He had previously been a suspect in the overdose death of his secretary, Ruth Spaulding, and had just been acquitted of incest charges involving his 14-year-old daughter, Tamar. Suspecting Hodel might be the mastermind behind the Black Dahlia murder, perhaps using his surgical skills to perform the hemicorporectomy, the district attorney bugged his home. For weeks in early 1949, investigators listened to the doctor's private life.
"Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she is dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary."
To his son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective who would later accuse his father of the crime, this was a confession. Steve Hodel further claimed the tapes captured the terrifying sounds of a woman screaming, followed by a silence, and then the rhythmic thud of a pipe striking a body, suggesting a murder was occurring in real time. But the files reveal a more complex game. According to transcripts analyzed by historians, Hodel was likely aware of the bugs. He was recorded saying,
"The men from the telephone company were here, and they're out to get me."
Before he could be indicted or fully cleared, Dr. Hodel fled the country. He relocated to the Philippines in 1950, where he lived for the next 40 years, leaving the confession on the tapes as just another riddle in the file. Just 3 weeks after Short's murder, another woman, Jan French, was found stomped to death. A message was scrawled on her body in lipstick. While the public fixated on Elizabeth Short, a darker reality was taking shape in Los Angeles. Between 1943 and 1949, over a dozen lone women were found brutally murdered, strangled, bludgeoned, and dumped in vacant lots. The police publicly treated them as isolated incidents, but privately, fear was mounting that a single predator was hunting the city. Authorities faced a terrifying question: was the Black Dahlia an anomaly, or was she the masterpiece of a serial killer? Just 3 weeks after Elizabeth Short was found, construction worker H.C. Shelby spotted a pile of clothes in a field in West Los Angeles. Beneath a fur coat lay the nude, battered body of 45-year-old Jeanne French. The brutality mirrored the Dahlia case. French had been beaten with a socket wrench and then stomped to death. The coroner noted she bled out slowly from a punctured lung, but the killer left a message that sent the press into a frenzy. Written in Jeanne's own bright red lipstick on her torso were the words,
"F you, BD."
Below it, the name Tex. TEX. The Herald Express immediately claimed BD stood for Black Dahlia, cementing the link in the public imagination. However, police files reveal a different theory. Captain Donahoe and the coroner believed the letters were actually PD, a direct taunt to the police department. The physical evidence presented a contradiction. The footprints found on the body were small, a men's size 6 or 7. This detail would become crucial in eliminating future suspects who didn't fit the physical profile of this stomper. In September 1949, a grand jury convened not just to solve the murders, but to investigate the Lapides' failure to solve any of the lone woman killings. The report was scathing. It highlighted lost evidence, corruption, and the mishandling of the red lipstick case. Even as the grand jury met, the women of Los Angeles continued to disappear. Jean Spangler, a 26-year-old actress, vanished in October 1949. Her purse was found in Griffith Park with a cryptic note.
"Kirk, can't wait any longer, Dr. Scott."
Steve Hodel, George's son, and a former homicide detective, would later claim his father was responsible for Spangler, Short, and French, a singular Black Dahlia avenger. By 1950, the Black Dahlia investigation had effectively stalled. The lone woman murders stopped, or perhaps simply faded from the headlines. The wiretaps were disconnected. The files were boxed up. The city moved on, leaving Elizabeth Short's murder as a permanent scar on the history of Los Angeles. For 80 years, the timeline of the Black Dahlia murder has hinged on a terrifying void. We know where Elizabeth Short was on the 9th of January, and we know where she was found on the 15th of January. What happened in the 6 days between remains the darkest mystery in American criminal history. On the evening of the 9th of January 1947, Robert Red Manley dropped Elizabeth Short off at the Biltmore Hotel. She told him she was meeting her sister, who was visiting from Boston. It was a lie. Her sister was nowhere near Los Angeles. Employees at the Biltmore saw Short use the lobby telephone. Shortly after, she was reportedly seen at the Crown Grill cocktail lounge, just a few blocks away. From that moment on, she vanished. For decades, investigators believed she spent this missing week hiding, perhaps staying with friends who never came forward, or perhaps she was abducted immediately. The 1949 grand jury ruled out almost all reported sightings during this week. But in 2026, a new piece of the puzzle surfaced, changing the narrative from missing to hunted. In January 2026, as the 79th anniversary of the murder passed, new details emerged regarding a specific interaction on the night of her disappearance. According to reports resurfaced by People magazine and analyzed by modern investigators, a police officer allegedly saw Short later that evening. The officer didn't just see a woman waiting. He saw a woman sobbing in terror. This new perspective on Short's fear aligns with a theory proposed in 2026 by Emmy-nominated producer Eli Frankel. In his book Sisters in Death, Frankel draws a direct line between the Black Dahlia and a forgotten cold case from Kansas City. 6 years before Elizabeth Short was severed in a Los Angeles lot, heiress Leela Welsh was murdered in Kansas City. Frankel's investigation suggests a pattern of stalking and unspeakable trauma that connects both women. The theory posits that Short was not a random victim of opportunity, but the target of a serial predator who had moved west, carrying his pattern of violence with him. Back in 1947, without the benefit of modern databases connecting Kansas City to California, the investigation stalled. The FBI files record the desperation of the LAPD. By the 1st of February, 1947, just 2 weeks after the body was found, The press reported the case had hit a stone wall. The Bureau processed hundreds of names. They checked the fingerprints of bellhops like Leslie Dillon, veterans like Leon Burris, and drifters. They scrutinized medical students at USC, suspecting the killer had surgical training due to the hemicorporectomy. But the files reveal that despite the 150 suspects and the 750 investigators, the physical evidence was elusive. The fingerprints on the Avenger letter were compromised in transit. The 104 million prints in the FBI database yielded no match for the killer. Today, the intersection of Norton Avenue looks nothing like the weed-choked lot where a mother once mistook a body for a mannequin. But the mystery remains as potent in 2026 as it was in 1947. From the 56-minute miracle of her identification to the digital detectives of the 21st century, the Black Dahlia files remain open. Was it the bellhop, the doctor, or a predator from Kansas City who vanished into history?
The murderer has never been found, and given how much time has passed, probably never will be. The legend grows.